Hi everyone, Shannon Petrovich with Therapist Talks. We're going to talk today about anxiety. So many people struggle with anxiety today, and we're going to really unpack it and talk about the different aspects that feed into and drive our anxiety today. So we're going to talk about the physical aspects, the emotional, the cognitive, the social, and even spiritual. First of all, the physical. Oftentimes people ignore all the physical things that they're doing that are driving their anxiety. Um, it's so important that we eat well, that we sleep well at night, that we take good care of our bodies, that we get outdoors and get some exercise. And I know that sounds like just something your mother told you to do, but honestly, there is a whole lot of brain chemistry that I will whittle down into some basic facts. So our brain chemistry is optimized by all of the things that we're doing, and it can also be de-optimized by the things that we're doing. So we need to sleep at night in order to repair and restore everything in our brain. We need to be up in the morning. So people who are nocturnal are taking a toll on their brains because the serotonin and endorphins and GABA and all the good chemistry is really depleted if we're asleep during the day and up at night. We need to eat well. We need to eat healthy foods, not processed foods. We need to eat lots of vegetables and some fruits and all those healthy things, and minimize the sugars and minimize the processed foods that really deaden our beings. The other things that are physical are trauma related. So when we have a trauma, well, let's look at it even more basically. So when we have stress, our brain is made to react to that. And if we have a stressful situation, it's meant to send off some adrenaline to give us the ability to fight, flight, or freeze. And those are the coping skills on the most basic animal level that we were created with. So when we have that stress, we get that fight, flight, or freeze adrenaline. We react to the stress, and then we sort of go, whew, and then calm down. Our brain chemistry is set up to balance that out. So the serotonin and the GABA and endorphins are set up to sort of put a lid on that adrenaline, and then we come back to a homeostasis. The problem is our lives are so constantly stressful that we're getting this blast of adrenaline constantly throughout our day. So what that creates is a buildup of cortisol and a depletion of the serotonin, endorphin, and GABA, so that we have this imbalance that we're struggling with all the time. And when a lot of people say that they are experiencing constant anxiety and they can't sleep and they feel exhausted, they're really experiencing like an overload of stress or trauma, or chronic low-grade trauma, and that sort of thing. And so we really do have to look at the physical. How is your physical being doing, and what kinds of things can you do to optimize your physical being and diminish those things that are causing you a lot of stress. So that's some of the physical. Emotionally, a lot of what people deal with in terms of anxiety is how we talk to ourselves, and it really matters. So we are so hard on ourselves in our culture. We tend to beat up on ourselves if we struggle. We beat up on ourselves if our lives aren't perfect. We feel like we are completely dirt if we are not splashed on the cover of every magazine with the most perfect body and the most perfect life and the most perfect partner and everything else. So a lot of people's anxiety is really emotional self-judgment. And we have to really look at that and be careful about that. When that is the primary concern, you really can step back and look at the way you talk to yourself. Notice those ways that you beat up on yourself emotionally throughout the day. And if you are doing that to yourself, really take a step back and ask yourself, would you say that to your best friend? Would you say that to somebody that you love who is struggling? 9 times out of 10, no. So it's really important to look at that and then to start treating yourself the way you would treat a friend, and start really talking to yourself in a way that's encouraging, that's supportive, that's caring, and that's nurturing. because we can really change those things, and it really does change the way we feel. We don't feel so driven and so devastated by every setback. So that's some of the emotional aspects. The cognitive aspects are the way we think about things. So if you think about how we drive our emotions with our thoughts, it's a really important aspect of all of our emotional distress. We can have an experience of just driving down the road and somebody cuts us off in traffic, and we can go into, wow, that person's just having a bad day and I don't want to be a part of that, and I'm going to just back off and kind of play my music and listen to the radio and not engage in that. Or in our heads we can go, oh my gosh, everybody's always cutting me off and this world sucks and blah blah blah, and you can really get yourself completely wound up in that one experience. So it's the same experience, but the way we talk to ourselves, or the way we interpret that, and the way we think about it, our thought drives that emotion. It either drives our emotion into anxiety and anger and depression, or it drives it into calming down, backing off, taking a breath. So those cognitive issues are super important. The other aspect of the way we drive ourselves cognitively is sort of related also to the emotional, which is how we talk to ourselves. So a lot of people are anxious because they talk to themselves the way they internalized maybe a parent's voice, or maybe somebody else in their lives, or maybe their own voice that they created due to childhood trauma. And this is where the emotional and the cognitive kind of interweave. Oftentimes the voice that we hear that drives us so hard is something we created before we were even 5 years old. It's something that happened to us that we sort of interpret and internalize and create a whole new life story about it. So that our story might be, well, if I was worth more, then my mom would have cared more about me. If I was smarter, my dad would have paid more attention to me and been proud of me. If I was, cuter or skinnier or what have you, then I would have, everybody would have liked me better. And so these self-judgments then drive that emotional anxiety. That's part of what drives people into eating disorders, or into workaholism, or into other addictions. So that's something to really look at and notice in yourself too, how much of your anxiety is driven by that internal voice. And then you want to take a step back and look at, where did that come from? And if you can see where it came from and notice it, then you can also say, is that true? Is it true that if I were A, B, or C, that so-and-so would have noticed me? Well, my mom or my dad or the other important people in my life had all these kinds of things going on, and it really didn't have a whole lot to do with me. I was just the kid that grew up in that family, and it resonated in me, but it wasn't about me. And so that's really important, that you start to dissect those things. The other aspect of anxiety that I see a lot of is social anxiety.